All right, this week we are going to be discussing trauma and poverty. We're going to start, first of all, talking about trauma and then move our way into talking about poverty. So, trauma. What is it? Trauma is an emotional response to a terrible event, according to the American Psychological Association. It puts you or a student and a person into that fight or flight mode. It can be cause more stress hormones such as cortisol to be released and adrenaline. Whenever you are in that fight and flight mode, you are not using your thinking brain, you are using your survival brain. There are certain things that can trigger trauma, or certain words, or certain locations, or series of events, and they evoke an intense emotion of fear in the person, and sometimes that makes it hard for them to control their emotions or their actions. So, memory function and learning. When a student has trauma, it causes their normal brain function to be affected. And when the brain is overstimulated by that trauma, then it makes it nearly impossible for them to act reasonably or for them to learn anything. There's areas of the brain that are related to memory and executive functioning, and they are very closely related. So there are sometimes skills that students may be lacking because of trauma that they've had, or skills that they've developed because of trauma from survival that they've done. So sometimes a student may be overreacting or acting in a way, and it may not have nothing to do with you, or it may just be a trauma response from something that they've encountered in their past. Okay, so when students are in trauma mode or in a fight or flight mode, it's hard for them to self-regulate their emotions and sometimes their actions as well. They might have rage, anger, hyperactivity, trembling, mood swings, and a wide variety of other actions that you may not otherwise see from that child. It could develop into a long-term challenges and cause PTSD. Students can also have guilt, hatred for themselves, shame because of that. But there are things that we can do to help minimize some of that. And I just really liked this quote. Having learned that the world is a dangerous place where even loved ones can't be trusted to protect you, children are often vigilant and guarded in their interactions with others and are more likely to perceive situations as stressful or dangerous. While this defensive posture is protective when an individual is under attack, it becomes problematic in situations that do not warrant such intense reactions. This quote rings true to me so much, especially with kids in foster care. They've been removed from their families because of something potentially bad that has happened. And a lot of kids in foster care do have trauma, and they have trauma responses. And so it really stood out to me that, like, the world is a dangerous place where even loved ones can't be trusted to protect you. And so they are going to have a hard time trusting their teacher to protect them if even their loved ones, their parents, their mom and dad wasn't there to protect them. So keep that in mind and don't take it personal when a kid is struggling with the effects of their trauma. It looks like this is going to go slow. Okay, so this right here is a brain example of the effects of trauma, abuse, and neglect on the developing brain. As you can see right here, where the temporal lobes are activated, over here you can see that those temporal lobes are not activated. So these temporal lobes are associated with memory skills. On the left, you have verbal memory skills, and on the right side, you have recall of nonverbal materials, music, drawings, things like that. Also, the prefrontal region, just in general, is associated with executive functioning. Now, when I say executive functioning, that's time management, organization, task initiation, just being able to pick up after themselves and do some of the simplest things that you would think that any kid would know how to do. But if they were living in a trauma and living in an abusive situation when they developmentally should have been learning those things, then they may not have learned it, or they may block it out. So you need to make sure that you're teaching kids. Don't just expect that they know it. If they're not doing something and you want them to know how to do it, teach it to them and teach it to them again and teach it to them again. Don't punish them just because they're not doing what you think they should be doing. Teach that skill because it's obviously missing. All right, come on. Let's see. There we go. Okay, so do's and don'ts of a trauma-informed, compassionate classroom. Make sure that in your classroom you are creating a safe place where everyone feels loved, valued, and safe, just above all safe. Emotional safety as well, where they can express their feelings and that their feelings are valid and heard. Make sure that you have a predictable schedule. Kids that came from trauma, they thrive on predictability and order. Build a sense of trust. Make sure that you keep your promises and that you don't break them, and be transparent. If something happens and there's a change, explain to them why. Offer choices. A lot of times these kids have not had any type of choice or power in their life. So providing them with choices instead of just commanding them to do things can cause them to de-escalate. Stay regulated. Don't let yourself get worked up. Even if the child is worked up, remain calm and in control. Make sure that you are ready to help students and ready to get them into their safe and calm and regulated area. Because if you show that you are not in a safe and regulated place, then they are going to feed off of you. And finally, there's not really anyone don't. Just don't punish kids again for behaviors that are because of trauma. And again, I already said that, but it's there. So now let's switch focus to poverty and education. A lot of times trauma is closely related to poverty, but they are two different things. There are kids that live in poverty that have trauma, but there's also kids that live in poverty that don't have trauma. It really just depends on the situation, and every situation is different. So let's talk about how poverty affects kids. Okay, so what is poverty? Poverty is the extent to which one does without basic needs or basic resources. Some of those resources may include financial things, emotional, like poverty can be emotional, mental or cognitive abilities, spiritual, physical, a support system of people that are there for you, relationships or role models, divorced households, things like that, knowledge of hidden rules at school and at work, and language or formal register. So lack of ability to talk. This makes me think of a deaf student whose parents were not willing to learn sign language. And the child did not get to start learning sign language until they entered in school. So they went, the first 5 years of their life of not having any way to communicate with their parents because the child was deaf and the parents were not willing to learn sign language. There is a thing such as generational poverty. It is poverty that is not just the current family, but the grandparents were in poverty. The great-grandparents lived in poverty. It's comes down through the pipeline. I had a student one year that told me that she wanted to work at Casey's gas station, and this was a pretty smart girl, and she said that's where her parents worked, and so that's where she wanted to work and had no aspirations for more. In another situation, I had a student that wanted to become a teacher one day, and we were having a parent-teacher conference, and the student was telling their parents about how someday they wanted to become a teacher, and the parent looked at the child and said, "Why? So you can be better than us?" That was a huge shock to me as a parent, because I do want my kids to be better than me someday. I want them to be smarter, to have more resources, to have a better life. And I work hard to try to make sure that they have abilities to do that. But it's something to keep in mind that not all family members have that same type of mindset for their children. And that's, again, a lot of times generational poverty. Then you have situational poverty. A parent may have lost a job, or there may have been like a medical crisis where the medical bills were piling up or things like that. Situational poverty is a lot easier typically to get out of than generational poverty. Generational poverty, it's hard to break a cycle, but situational poverty is a little bit easier, but neither one of them are ideal situations, and neither one of them are things that I guess you could say are easy at all, because both of them are hard, just hard in different ways. I'm going to put online a could you survive activity. This is not required, but I do think it's a good activity. I was surprised at even my own results from this could you survive activity. And so I will link that on Blackboard so that way you can do that to see if you could survive in any of the following classes. If you could survive in wealthy or poverty. I'll be honest, I couldn't survive in wealthy and I couldn't survive in poverty. I was straight up middle class. Growing up, I was probably low middle class to high poverty. So it just depends on your current situation, but it was very eye-opening to see some of the things that were on there. Okay, so some facts and figures. In 2023, the supplemental poverty rate was estimated to be 12.9%. And that, there we go. But the official poverty rate was 11.1%. In 2022, the poverty rate for 18 and under was estimated to be at 16.3%. In 2019, the official poverty rate for 18 and under was 14.4%. So it's going up. And I suspect that if we looked at figures for 2024, 2025, that it's going to be higher than what those are now because of the amount of inflation and housing costs and things like that. 2021, 11 million children live in poverty. 3 million children under the age of 5 were in poverty. All right, so how does poverty impact education? Students who are living in poverty may have delayed brain development. It goes back to some of the trauma-informed things, or there's certain areas of the brain that are activated by certain situations, and students living in poverty sometimes will have those trauma areas of their brain impacted, which can cause delays with language development, with creativity, things like that. They may struggle in academic areas. They may not have people at home that can help them whenever they need support with academics. I personally, as an elementary teacher, did not give homework anymore because a lot of times there was not somebody at home that could help the children with the homework. And it was hard. The kids that were doing the homework were the ones that didn't need it. And the kids that needed the homework the most were the ones that weren't doing it because they didn't have that support. And so I just found that it was easier just to make sure that I was there for them at school to help them. Kids living in poverty may have frequent absences. They may not have sanitary living conditions, and which can cause health issues, cause them to be sick more often. Cars may break down and they may not have a way to get their child to school. They may have health concerns, including medical health. We kind of just touched on the physical health, but mental health is another one. Many times, children that are struggling with mental health and live in poverty, they don't have the resources to get mental health help. They don't have the financial capability, or they may not even know who to reach out to. They may not have their basic needs for clothing, food, shelter met. They might live in areas with environmental risk factors. A lot of them will live in houses with like lead paint, or like holes in the wall or holes in the floor, or broken windows that are just covered, by plastic, things like that, because they can't afford to make the proper repairs on the home. And so those types of things impact the children. Another quote that I just really loved: children who directly or indirectly experience risk factors associated with poverty or low parental education have higher than a 90% chance of having one or more problems with speech, learning, and or emotional development. That is huge, and it's scary and sad. All right, so 7 ways to lead and succeed with children who are living in poverty. First, you need to establish an environment where every child is accepted and nothing less than the best is tolerated. Even if a child is living in poverty, they are still capable of performing at high levels and having high levels of learning. So you still need to hold them to that high expectation, but you need to provide them with scaffolds and support to help them meet those areas to be able to reach their fullest potential. Number 2, find the positive in every child in every situation. Even the kids that are tough, there's always going to be a positive for those children. So find it and thrive on it. Focus on it and help those kids. Number 3, provide opportunities for educators to learn more about children who live in poverty. If you know about it, or if you are familiar with the situation, Find ways to educate others. And even teachers that have been teaching for a long time, sometimes they may forget the struggles that kids may have. So those professional developments are always good. If you have a way to provide that, provide it. Number 4, eliminate practices that limit or hinder student success. If a student is required to complete an assignment at home that requires internet, make sure that they have internet. A lot of kids may not have internet at home, or even my children were required to record a video, and this was before they had their own cell phones. And so I, of course, let them use my cell phone, but make sure that when you're creating assignments and when you're assigning things, that you're not causing these kids to be left out or to have to go to extenuating circumstances to be able to complete the assignment. Number 5, change what doesn't work and incorporate strategies and practices that support achievement. Change what you're doing. As educators, we should always be learning and growing and trying to get better. So make sure that if something is not working, you figure out why it's not working and you change it to make it work better. Number 6, measure and report progress frequently. When I first became a teacher, I was afraid to tell parents that their child was failing or that they were missing a skill. I was afraid that it was a reflection of me, and it wasn't. Sometimes kids just need extra help. And it's okay to tell parents that their child is lacking in a certain skill, whether they live in poverty or don't live in poverty. The hard thing is if you were a teacher that goes through and passes a child all through the years because you're too afraid to fail them, and they get to a teacher, and then finally the teacher says, hey, they can't do these things. And then it's an even more difficult conversation for the teacher that is willing to have that conversation for the parents to say, yeah, I don't know why they got all A's last year, but they are not able to add and subtract 2-digit numbers, and they should be adding and subtracting 6-digit numbers at this point. So I'm not sure why they got an A, but we are missing this skill and we need to work on it. So don't be afraid to communicate the hard things, because the student is going to be able to progress and the parents are going to know where their child is at. And finally, work collaboratively to develop the best environment for children. This is all of the children's teachers, the school counselor. Sorry, you'll have to excuse my dogs. The school counselor, the parents, any other teacher that might have contact, anyone that's in the building that can have a positive impact. Be sure that you work with them. Okay, I have a great video here for you that we are going to finish up with. If I can get it. I'm not sure it's going to play. I may just have to link this video for you to play online. Yep. Okay, this video is not going to play, so I will link this on Blackboard for you to watch, but it is such a powerful video, so please be sure that you watch that. That is all I have for you. Have a great day.